Everyone, and welcome to Asset Management Awareness Month. I'm so glad that you all made it today for our second Membership Wednesday webinar that we have scheduled among all of the other very exciting activities planned throughout this month. I hope you all are enjoying the various activities that we have going on, and I hope you're planning to participate in the many that we still have yet to come. So before we get started with this webinar, I just have a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, there is a poll on your screen right now, just a fun question to help us kind of gauge how asset management is valued in your organization before we get started. So if you haven't answered that yet, then please do so. I'll share the results with you in just a moment. And then secondly, our presenter, Bob Kaler, has offered to answer questions throughout the entire webinar at whatever point you feel is necessary to ask a question. Everyone is in mute mode for this webinar, just so we can minimize the distractions that are going on. So if you do have a question, then you have a couple of options. If you would like to answer or ask the question out loud, then to the left of your name and kind of the control panel that you'll see through the webinar, there's a little hand button. So if you press the hand to the left of your name, that will raise your hand, and then at a good stopping point, I will unmute you and you can ask Bob that appropriate question. Or if you would prefer that I just ask the question for you, you also have the option of typing your question into the panel as well, and then I'll just ask the question on your behalf instead of unmuting you. So those are the two questions that the two options for asking questions that we have. So let's see, before I introduce Bob, I'm going to close the poll that we have going on, and let's just take a quick look at the results. Okay, I'm going to share the results here. So you can see that 57% of you are getting a lot of support. Everyone in your organization does recognize the value that you provide. 43% of you said sometimes. It kind of depends on what's going on. And none of you said no. So that's really great news. I'm glad to see that at least you're getting some recognition in your organization. And then I hope that after Bob's presentation today, you'll have some more ideas on how you can get support from your organization to help you show the value that you do provide as well. So hopefully we can build upon that today. So I am going to pass the control over to Bob here. So our guest presenter for this webinar is Mr. Bob Kaler, who is our Vice President of the Western Region. And he has agreed to share with us a great presentation about what asset management does to add value and what should be shared within your organization. So I think we're going to get a lot of great ideas to share with your organizations today, and I hope you're all able to learn quite a bit from it. So Bob, I am going to let you take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I need you to pass me grant me the ability to show my slides, because it's not showing up on my control panel here. But good afternoon, or good morning, or perhaps even good evening, depending on where our NPMA members are scattered across the globe. Thank you very much for joining us today. And Jessica, I still don't have the ability to grab the screen.
It has you listed as the presenter now, actually. I think you should be able to.
Am I showing? Oh, and here we go. Okay. Now I can do it. So very good. Thank you very much, and hopefully everyone can see my screen now. I just wanted to introduce myself. Again, thank you, Jessica. This is a great month for us in our profession. Asset Management Awareness Month, and I'm very pleased to be presenting to you today. Some of you may know me. For those that don't, I've been involved with NPMA in the asset management world for over 15 years now, and I've worked with organizations in the federal government, major universities. I've worked with federal contractors in NASA, DOD, DOE, and other government agencies, along with commercial organizations. I'm very fortunate to have worked with many organizations who have outstanding asset management programs that are staffed by professionals with a dedication to excellence and professional standards, most of them NPMA members. But I've also had the opportunity to engage with some organizations whom, well, let's say it seems to be perhaps an afterthought, or the organization doesn't really dedicate the organization to asset management that can improve its operations. Oftentimes for these organizations, asset management is no big problem until asset management becomes a big problem, and then it's a really big problem. And I want to thank the former President Mike Hay for coming up with that catchphrase, because I think it really talks about what we face in the world of asset management. I also want to say that I'm very pleased with the results of the poll that I heard, that most of your organizations believe that you provide significant value, and all of them really do recognize some of the value that you provide. What we're going to talk about today, and what my goal to talk about today, is some specific areas where you can add more value, you can bring value to the organization, how they can leverage all of the knowledge and experience that you have gained as property professionals out there and have been able to get as a result of your affiliation with the NPMA. There we go. So, so the next slide. So I'm really excited about this Asset Management Awareness Month. I think Jessica has been doing just a fabulous job of getting the word out and helping people across the entire spectrum of organizations that belong to the NPMA get the word out through their organizations and through their business channels to bring asset management awareness to the forefront. The National Property Management Association is a professional membership association, and it's for people who have responsibility and ultimate accountability for physical assets. Our association members really oversee effective and efficient management of fixed assets, and we ensure that proper records are kept of material, equipment, and other movable property that are on your asset registers. So it's, I think it's only natural that on Membership Wednesday that we'd want to talk about and spend some time talking about the value that we bring to the organization. Because, asset management means a lot of different things to different people. And it really depends on their perspective. If you work in a fairly large organization, if you ask around, you'll probably find 5, 10, maybe even more groups who do asset management. And what they declare as asset management is different from the work that we do in our traditional role as a property manager. But there's overlap. There's a lot of overlap in the tasks that we take on and that we do. So it's doubly important to take this opportunity to share what it is we do with those around us and with our organization so that they can understand the value that we bring. And lastly, I hope that you continue to participate in the Asset Management Month activities. And I saw this morning that some of these selfies are starting to show up. So I've seen them on Facebook and bounce around. So I think if you've got a chance, everybody's got a cell phone camera now, make your little sign about what the NPMA and what asset management helps you and means to you. Take your selfie, get them posted up. You can send them to Jessica or post them directly to the Facebook page, and we'll get a chance for all of us to help spread the word in that viral kind of campaign. So just to bring us back to a common starting point, I drove the Google bus to find out what they said an asset was. And so you'll see that Google brought back an answer that I think you'll find interesting. And I decided just to screen print it rather than do anything else, so you can see right what I came up when I said definition of asset. Now, the other side of it is that 238 million results came back. So I guess that means there's 238 million definition of an asset, or at least if we talk to some people out there, sometimes it feels like that. But in this particular definition that came right back, they really gave us 3 different elements. The first one says a useful or valuable thing, person, or quality. And I find that interesting because they talk about things or people, because they're both assets, and equality is a strong point. But their second definition is property owned by a person or company regarded as having value and available to meet debts, commitments, or legacies. So they really talk about tangible things that have value. And then the last part, which again I thought was interesting, especially in the context of what we do at NPMA, is military equipment such as planes, ships, communications, and radar installations used in military operations. Because a lot of our membership, a significant portion of our membership, works with the DoD and a lot of military type of equipment, including things like planes, ships, communications equipment, and other installations. And so as we look at these definitions, I want you to bear in mind these definitions as we go through the discussion, as they seem to describe what we as NPMA members and property professionals handle in our role as asset managers. So I've titled this talk, Utilizing Your Most Valuable Assets. And the subtitle, or perhaps even the primary title, just in smaller letters, is Things Property Managers Do Really Well That Should Be Adopted Across the Enterprise. What I'm trying to talk about here is I want to go back to a statement I made earlier, which is you've got a lot of different asset managers in your organization. If you're one of those rare organizations in which you as the asset manager, the NPMA certified people, are able to do all of the asset management activities across your organization, that is fantastic. That really, really warms my heart to know that organizations may be taking asset management serious enough to have their property professionals and their asset management professionals that are well trained running their entire asset management organization across their enterprise. But if that's the case, I think you're very much in the vast minority, because most organizations have many different parts of their organization doing what they think of as asset management. So what we want to talk about are some of the things that we do in our specialization of asset management that should be deployed across the entire organization, and what value that it can bring to them and why it's good. So when we talk about assets, I like to think about it in a way that I learned when I was back as a young buck trying to get through college, when they talked about organizational theory. And I had a professor that said, you only need 3 things to run a business, but you better have all 3 things. First thing you need is money. You need cash to pay the bills, to pay the people, to keep the operation going. Cash is king. And as you know, a lot of people consider asset management in the financial world managing that cash, because going back to our Google definition, that would be an asset because it's got value. It can be used to meet debts and commitments. So we've got the money aspect of an organizational asset. The second thing are the things that you have that you need. If you're in a production shop, if you're building things, if it's a computer, you need a lot of things. If you're law enforcement, you need, vehicles and gear in order to do your job. If you are in production, you need manufacturing equipment. If you're in logistics, you need trucks, etc. If you are in design and engineering, you need computers and prototype equipment. So there's a lot of different things that we have. So in addition to money and things, the third asset that organization requires, absolutely, is the people. And so often we hear organizations talk about our most important asset is our people. Our people is what makes our organization. And that's really true because there's a culture that gets embodied in people. There are legacy processes that people know. There are procedures and ways of doing things that have been designed and brought together and used and improved by people throughout their organization. And if everybody in an organization left in one day, it would be very difficult for that organization to continue operating, even at a minor level, without the experienced people that we have. So when we look at these assets, we say there's three primary types of assets. So we're going to be talking about things today, right? Well, wrong. Because I think, yes.
We have a question.
Sure.
So just one moment. Karen, I am going to unmute you. Karen, do you have a question? Okay, I'm going to mute Karen back. Occasionally we accidentally, if we press a little hand next to us, sometimes we don't realize we do it. So I will lower your hand, Karen. Please raise it again if you have a question. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, sure, thanks. And open for questions, and if it was a mistake, that's okay too. Chat box. So as I said, we were going to be talking about things, right? Because that's what we're all about, is things. And I am saying in my talk today, no, the most valuable asset that we have that we need to utilize is our people. A well-trained, experienced employee is the most valuable asset. And especially when you can leverage that individual's skills and experience to add additional value. And I think the message that I want to focus on today is that in order for organizations to be more successful, they need to be able to absorb the additional value that is out there in every single one of our NPMA certified or trained or educated people that are out there that know how to do some of these asset management tasks that are not getting effectively done within their organization. And it doesn't mean, when I go through these elements, it doesn't mean I think that necessarily all of the people that are traditionally property managers take on the roles to do all of the work across the entire organization. If the organization is expanded and you get some more resource, I think it is great. But more so, it's the knowledge that you have that needs to be shared that is the key here. There's that old story about somebody going into a mechanic shop and couldn't get his car to run, and sees the mechanic, and the mechanic just takes this little wrench and taps the side of the engine, and he's done. It's working fine. And the customer said, "How much is it?" And the guy said, $100. They said, $100, all you did was take a little wrench and tap it on the side. He said, yes, but knowing where to tap is worth $95, and $5 is for my effort in tapping it. So knowing how to do something is really the key that you can bring, and you can bring your expertise and help your organization do something a little bit better. So a lot of organizations have a lot of challenges. So when we look at these large organizations or a disconnected organization and look at the challenges that they have regarding asset management, it really falls into a number of different categories. The first thing is that we don't generally have a complete or comprehensive asset register. Asset register is a term that is being used a lot more for the database and a complete census of all the assets an organization has. So it would be a centralized system or database that would have the information about all of your assets. So we really don't have that. What we have is usually a plethora of systems. We can have fixed asset systems, we can have IT systems, and you may think about your own organization, start shaking your head up and down and say, yep, and all these places keep assets. So whether it's, like I mentioned, fixed assets or IT, then there are production systems. There's, if you're in an engineering type of environment, you may have a lot of calibration. There are maintenance and reliability programs for shop floor operations, as well as the other parts of your organization. The maintenance and reliability program has assets. Then the facilities management. There are, in the new generation building information systems that says, well, we've got records of everything that's inside the building, the building and everything that's there. And then there are government property. So there's quite often more than a handful of different systems that are all doing asset management, and yet they're not organized across the entire enterprise in what they're looking at. Each one is accurate for its intended purpose and its limited scope. I think that many organizations do a very good job, but it is with blinders and it is in a silo. So the challenge arises when assets are used in more than one discipline or system, because oftentimes there is overlap, as I mentioned before, between these different systems. So now you have these different assets in these different systems that are not necessarily the same. You've got different information. So the challenge is you've got this different information and you don't have consistent processes across the organization. And if you have spent any time looking at the new ISO 55000 standard, which is an international standard on asset management, the key underlying thread throughout the entire process of setting up and getting a certification to the standard is to have consistent processes with leadership and using consistent data. So you have the challenge an organization has is bringing this all together, having consistent processes, using best practices, having consistent data, and focus of leadership on the entire process, because we end up with underutilized resources, both in terms of equipment and individuals, because you've got these people that are doing asset management in these different areas, but it's limited to their particular silo when they can add significant value. And we wind up without this data with phantom assets. When I talk to some of my friends that are out there in the data fortification, data reconciliation business, physical inventory, they talk about incredible amounts of phantom assets that are found in organizations, either assets that they find that don't appear on any books anywhere or on a single book but not in the other books where they're necessary, or they think they have some items that they just can't find. And a lot of times these numbers are staggering. Up to 20% of the total number of items are phantom assets. And then the final killer for organizations is redundancy, because you're doing many times the same kind of thing in all these different silos with different people, with different processes, and you've got essentially some chaos going on because there is no consistent process and there's no consistent way of looking at the data that's coming out of it. So if you wanted to look across the entire enterprise, you don't have that capability because you just don't have the processes and the systems to help. So what does that mean for your organization? Well, I think you can see that they would be financial killers and they would be efficiency killers. We've got too many systems. We've got multiple people excuse me, working within the asset management realm and maybe not doing things consistently or well. So when I say utilizing your most valuable assets, I believe that for these organizations, their most valuable assets are not individual items or equipment, but it could be the property managers out there, people like you on this call, who can add value to your processes by streamlining and reducing redundancy and increasing efficiency. You as a property professional bring a lot of value. Doug Getz in his talks really brings this point home. He's very good at it. He's very passionate about it. If you've been on any of his webinars or seen him live, you know his passion. But the value that you bring as an NPMA member and as an individual that's been educated, certified, perhaps certified, trained by NPMA, is that you have been educated. You've got some very good information, and this education is not simply book learning. It's real. It's been vetted by multiple people who bring this out, and when you go into these training environments, you meet other people who are doing things like you're doing in different organizations. So you're sharing information amongst peers, and oftentimes that's the best way to get educated. So we have these training classes, we have national education seminars, and the content is rich and robust. We have tremendous amount of education available to us across the entire asset life cycle, learning from people who become our mentors. And finally, we also have these SIGs. So your education is an ongoing, organic thing. If you have a question, I see a lot of these questions that come up through the SIG groups where people are getting answers from other professionals out there that are doing things perhaps a slightly different way and helping them solve their challenges. So your value is that you have been well trained and you have been well educated and you have a lot of knowledge about the industry and how other people are doing things that you can bring to bear for your organization. And you do that every day in the silo in which you work if you are working in a silo. The other value that you can bring is that you have policies and procedures. By the nature of most of the people and organizations that belong to the NPMA, we've been forced to have a property plan and documented our policies and procedures. And that's a good thing because we have a process that we can follow, that we can use for metrics, that we can use to measure outcomes. And these policies and procedures can be adapted for other parts of your organization. Your value is also that you are a professional. Again, this is a very big hot button with Doug Getz and the certification side of NPMA and Beth Greens, who does a great job in her role on a national level for certification. But the professional certification means something. It means that you have met standards that have been set by individuals within your industry to show the skills and talents and knowledge that you can bring to your organization. So the professional certification is important, because if we go back, and oftentimes I look at what other people are doing, other organizations in other silos, people just got thrown in to whatever it is that they're calling asset management. And they've learned it on the fly. They've learned it from what they do in their jobs day to day. But they've got no training, no certification, and no support group of peers in which to bounce off ideas and get feedback and better thoughts about how to go about doing asset management within their organizations. And last, the value you bring is that you have proven yourself. What do I mean by that? Well, I think that you've proven what you can do each and every day, because just about everybody that's a part of NPMA has to do audits. They get audited, and they get self-assessments. They have their internal audits. They have their government audits. They've got external audits. And it is requiring you to perform at a high level. This is not necessarily so in other disciplines of asset management across your organization. So the fact that you have been educated, that you know what you're doing, that you've got policies and procedures in place, you've been certified, and that it has been proven that you do a good job, you have a tremendous amount of things to offer to your organization.
Bob, could you do us a favor and share a little bit more information about what these SIGs actually are for those that may not be familiar with the program?
Certainly. The SIGs are special interest groups, and they are a group, they are an online community, and it is, you can get to it by going to the NPMA site, but there's also a site it's hosted on a social platform called Ning. And what this is broken up into a variety of different groups. And Jessica, I forget how many we have, 10 or 11 different special interest groups now. And it is for government property, there's physical inventory, there's disposition, there's university property, there's federal property, and so on. So I belong to multiple groups, and I think that many of the participants do belong to multiple groups, because what we do spans across multiple disciplines. And so if you've got a question, you can go out into these, essentially onto the software that's chat software, and you can load up a question, you can add documents, you can look at things, and then you can ask a question, and your peers that are part of the special interest group answer back, and they start a conversation, and they help you understand some of the different thought processes that you need to go through in order to solve whatever challenge that you're currently looking at. Anything else you want to say on that, Jessica?
I think you did a great job of covering it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we will get you, if you're interested, if you haven't been out to the special interest groups, I highly recommend you go look at that. There's a lot of great information there, and it's a good source for ongoing education. I've learned a lot whenever I go out there. So given the entire framework that I put out there, the fact that, well, we've got these assets, and there's a lot of different parts of an organization that may or may not be doing things the same way as you're doing them, but as a professional, you really bring a lot of value to your organization, and your organization may be hurting, and they may not be doing things real well. So what are 5 things that you do really well that should be adopted across your enterprise? Because in essence, we're really hoping to bring value and effectiveness to more of your organization. Make your organization more successful. It'll be more streamlined. It may save money. It will definitely impact the bottom line. And it should result in better operations, becoming better customer service. So it's a win-win-win thing. So I want to talk about, there's a lot of different things that may be appropriate to your organization that we do in the asset management world. And especially as a property manager, I want to talk about these 5 things. I came up with 5 things that I think that we do really well, that we should take out to our organization and say, we can help with that. And whether it's providing advice, whether it's helping people understand what we do and how we do it so they can adapt it. Because if we can help streamline some of these processes, procedures, and have consistent processes across an organization, that's going to help with a lot of different things in an organization, including ISO 55000. It'll help with things like Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a financial reporting requirement that your organization has, and other types of business process engineering that would be important. So the first thing that we do really, really well is physical inventory. And when I'm talking about doing physical inventory, I'm not talking about just walking around with a barcode scanner or a clipboard and checking off when you find something. That's an important part of physical inventory, but that's not necessarily where your skills as a professional property person lie. It's really the process of setting up physical inventory, understanding what you need to do through that physical inventory, analyzing the results, and reporting back the results. I think that is what we as NPMA people are able to do far more effectively than other people that I've seen in organization. Quite often organizations farm out to a physical inventory company. Just go out, shoot everything, and tell us what we have. Well, that really doesn't give you much other than a listing of what you have. And what the physical inventory process, the value that it brings to an organization, is understanding how we can do that most effectively and what the results tell us. Does it tell us that we don't have good control over our property, or does it tell us that we're doing a good job, we're not losing anything? Does it tell us how we're improving, or are we not improving? And then does it report back? Do we have what we think we have? Does it match to the contracts? Does it match to our fixed asset register? Are we reporting correctly, both whether it's on a contract, whether it's to the government, whether it's to a grantee that gives us, or a grantor that gives us a contract, or perhaps are we reporting it through to the SEC by what we have? So the physical inventory is something that I think that we as property professionals do really, really well. And the expertise that you bring and that you should focus on and share with your organization is that, excuse me, you have a process. You have a defined process about how you're going to conduct your physical inventory. And then you make a plan. An important part of your physical inventory is that you measure outcomes. What are the results of physical inventory? And what does it mean to our organization? And if you've been certified by NPMA, you have had instruction in performing inventories. It's part of the curricula, and it's part of the testing process for any of your certifications to understand physical inventories. We also have standards, and you have these standards that you can reference. There's a number of them out there, but the highlighted one I've got in here is ASTM standard, E2131, and is a standard practice for inventory verification. You can look at that, and it talks about how an organization should conduct a physical inventory and what the standard practice can be. It's based on best practices, and it's based on voluntary consensus standards from a great number of people who have come together, shared their thought, and came up with what they believe is a best standard practice for organizations to use. And then you also have access to ongoing training, and that is either by webinar, it's by online courses, you can go to courses, or you can go to the NES. And every NES I go to, there are any number of different sessions about conducting physical inventories and the different types of outcomes that you look for and some of the tools and processes that you can employ to make your physical inventory sterling. So again, the first thing that you can do that we do really, really well that you can take across your organization is physical inventory. The second thing that property managers can do is keeping track of sensitive items. Because as we know, it's becoming apparent that sensitive items are really growing. The more things we look at, the more they become sensitive. And the risk associated with not managing these sensitive items well is growing every day. Most organizations have a lot of sensitive items. They could be computers, they could be phones, they could be, disk drives. Sensitive items are documents, information that people have. I think about the great story, I think it was on 60 Minutes, about the used copiers. And the fact that people were looking at used copiers could go back, look in the memory, and see the last, whatever the memory holds, 100 or 200 pages of things that went through their copier and get it. And as the investigative team went through, they found different types of financial documents in there, and they found personal information, including HR information. And release of that would have been illegal. That's sensitive equipment, but that's not life-threatening. But there can be life-threatening sensitive items because a lot of organizations also have things that need to be tracked very carefully. And it could be things like their security force weaponry. It could be some bioagents that they have in their testing process that they can't get away. Or it could be other sensitive items such as export controlled. So keeping track of your sensitive items is something that the NPMA is really good at. NPMA members have a lot of expertise because many of the programs that a lot of you work in involve classified information. They have other high-level security requirements, and by doing so, you have developed policies and procedures for tracking the sensitive items and putting them under special control, perhaps special inventory rules, making sure that there is no movement that's not appropriate, that also the disposal processes are followed for these sensitive items to make sure that they don't get released in any sort of way. And there's a lot of education and experience for people in dealing with these sensitive items. There's been a number of sessions at the NES and sessions through NPMA. And also many of you have specialized training. You may have had some training from your government sponsors, from DOD or other agencies within the government, law enforcement agencies that you may be working with, and specialized training for dealing with sensitive items. I know that I've been through some training in my organization involving these sensitive items and what can be released and how to protect items. So we have that, and those skills don't necessarily permeate throughout your organization. We also have some standards that NPMA members have worked together to come up with voluntary consensus standards through ASTM. I've listed a couple of them here, and they talk about the equipment control matrix. Another one for assessment impact of mobile data storage devices, which could hold sensitive information on them. So our ability to have the policies and procedures and the tight controls that we are able to put into place for sensitive items on the NPMA side is a great value to your organization, because the risk of releasing sensitive items is huge, and it's something that really needs to be paid attention to and will have the attention of senior executives, especially if you have a problem. Like I said, asset management is not a problem until it's a problem, and then it's a really big problem. And you haven't seen a really big problem until it's sensitive information that has been lost. So the third thing that we do really well is managing assets that are tied to agreements. And that's really keeping track of these things. And within the NPMA and the work that most of us do, we are dealing a lot with contracts and grants. So we know that we've got these contracts that have some terms and conditions and things that we need to pay attention to, and the individual items or the assets that we're managing belong to these contracts. But there's a lot of other agreements that are tied to assets throughout an organization that most people do not do a very good job of. Things like warranties, maintenance contracts, or even what I call personal provisioning. Those are items that are given to an employee under basically what is called, or what has been typically called, a property pass, but they're in your possession. And that's really an agreement. That's an agreement between you and your organization saying, I'll take care of these things and I'll give them, you'll give them to me, I'll use them for my work, and we will keep track of them. But in reality, most people don't know when their warranties are in effect, what items are on maintenance contracts. They rely on the vendors to tell them that. And once they've given things to people, they don't really necessarily remember. I mean, the IT guys know where some of your stuff is, but again, most people say, oh, the IT guy's got my computer wrong. He thinks I got this one and got that one, because swap outs happen. And so managing assets that are part of agreements is something that we do really well. And the expertise that you have as a property professional is that you do have, again, education. I mean, I'm going to hammer on this because that's what NPMA really is all about. It's an educational organization that brings people together, but we've got courses and seminars, and we've got within the certification, there are segments about working with contracts. So almost all of you property managers are working with agreements of some sort, grants and contracts primarily. So you understand about start and end dates, you understand about taking the asset information, managing these things to the terms and conditions of the contract, and you keep track of it and you report on the status on a regular basis. What do we have? What's coming off? What's due? And you can see how that would apply to things like maintenance contracts or warranties, because it's just an asset that is tied to something that has terms and conditions for how we're going to use it or how our support system is going to work. And then lastly, you have experience in closing out these contracts. And it's important for things like maintenance contracts that once a term comes to the end, are you going to renew it? Is it going to be put on another contract? And all of that is important because you need to be able to track those assets and make sure they don't fall through the cracks. And we know that in grants and contracts with the government, that you can't let anything fall through the cracks. So NPMA property managers have proven that they really do a very good job of managing assets that are tied to agreements. So that's another area within your organization where you have the expertise and the policies and the procedures for doing it well and doing it right and being able to show significantly good outcomes to your organization. Number 4, property managers do a really good job of tracking transfer and movement and transportation, because we don't want to lose visibility or custodial responsibility over these assets. Within most organizations, what I am told by firms that do this asset reconciliation is that if it moves, it doesn't necessarily get tracked to a new location. So many items are not where they think they are because organizations do not do a good job of tracking where they've moved something or if they've moved it to somebody else's responsibility. They have the item on an asset register someplace because they say we've got it, but where it is and who's responsible for it, we really don't know. But property managers, they do. So your expertise includes your own prescribed process for transfers and movements. And especially if you are in the DoD world and you have to move things around, you've got forms that you've got to follow and specific requirements for how you move things and track them and put documentation in place to ensure that the visibility for that movement and transfer is very bright and open. And as you see, we've got these standards. We've got a series of standards that you're all able to reference and talk about how we do movement. And of course, again, you do a lot of training. Movements is part of each one of the certification. I know with the material and the testing that you have to understand movements. And you, as a property manager, especially if you're doing it under the government regulations, whether for the federal government, for a contractor, whether it's a grant that you're doing in the university, you have to capture every movement and you have to capture the details, including any custodial changes. And when the audit time comes, the auditors are going to be looking for that. So you've got that built into your process, and you do it very well. So again, movement, transfer, transportation, those are things that we as property managers do really well that are typically not done well by other asset management disciplines. And finally, the last thing that property managers do really well is keeping complete records and the history. The one thing that keeps coming back across organizations is they don't have records. If they're not being run by professionals, property professionals, trained, there's NPMA or other organizational groups with processes, they really don't know what they have, and they don't know what's happened to items over its life cycle. That's really not the case with property managers. You do a really good job of doing it. Like I say, this is your lifeblood, keeping the records. The training and certification around records is huge. There are many, many different types of seminars, presentations, NES presentations, training courses, webinars around records and proper record keeping. There are always conversations in the SIG groups about records and record keeping. And so this is something that property managers do exceptionally well. There are standards out there that talk about characteristics of equipment records, and then there's also a standard for uniform data management. That really gives organizations a leg up on ISO 55000, because one of the underpinning tenets of ISO 55000 is to make data uniform across the entire enterprise so that management and leadership can understand what they have. So we have that. We bring that. We've got exceptional record-keeping capabilities because we have government requirements on most of these, and we're always subject to audit. And these are the things that we all look for, having our records really good, our records are complete, and they're auditable. And lastly, managing excess and disposal. You know, this is a very complex process that is vitally important, and it's really a discipline within the greater discipline of asset management. It's very focused on what of looking at your excess and going through a disposal process. I talk to people, and a lot of people talk to me and say 50% of their asset management activity is around disposal. So in looking at that, it obviously is a very important part of what a property management does. So we've got a lot of established processes and procedures. We've got significant education and training across all of these places, whether it's NES, whether it's the training courses or certification, and a lot of specialized training that you might get. You get specialized training in ITAR regulations, and all of that is very important in the excess and disposal processes. And more importantly, you as a property manager really understand the complexities of going through the disposal process and all the things that you need to do, and the nuances of what needs to be done given the types of assets that you have. There are a lot of standards out there. I've just highlighted 3 here of the standards for disposal that we've put together as a professional or ASTM as an organization has published these standards through work from NPMA members who have really gotten together and put together their best processes and practices for disposing of excess equipment. So in summary, and thank you very much for participating, we have these great ability within property managers to bring value to our organization. We have been educated. There is a lot of material that's been vetted over many years by many people to make sure that the best possible education and content is available to our members. And that goes out, and so there's this great education which now is embodied in you. And you as a property management have this wealth of information on how to do things, why we need to do things, the value of doing these things, that you can take them to your organization. So we're, as part of Asset Management Awareness Month, the message is reach out to your organization and show them your value. Spend some time going back and looking at your own organization and what things that you can, what things that you do not do well as an organization that you can bring value to. Whether it's these 5 things that I've highlighted in my presentation, or whether it's something else that you need to do really is really important to your organization's success, that is part of the underlying discipline that you do as property management and the 10 steps in the life cycle, and help your organization to show the value. So with that, I would like to open it up for any questions or discussion that anybody on the line might like to start.
would like to ask a question or say anything, then please raise your hand. Well, Bob, you must have covered everything, so
Well,
you're all
well, I want to thank everybody for taking the
one
time.
Question.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so the question is, where would we be able to research the standards that you were quoting?
Okay, they're within ASTM, and there you go to www.astm.org. Or if you want some information, write down my email address. I've got 2 email addresses there on the slide for you, and send me an email, and I'll link you through to some places where you can look at them. I believe that one of the SIGs out there is about standards, and you can join it. And the standards organization, ASTM.org, you can look at that. You could join for a small amount of money and become a participant and help write them. And it's a very good, very good organization. It's well run, and Bill Franklin has been doing a great job over the last few years of managing the E53 committee, which is the committee that the committee that develops the standards around asset management. And there are, I believe, 27 active standards now in the E53 subcommittee that address asset management.
Very good. And I believe the standards are available to purchase for just $99, so a pretty good deal. And you can find that on the NPMA website as well.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah, the standards. The standards are quite effective, and they're very affordable for organizations as they want to adopt some of these things and look at what industry and the voluntary consensus standards of peer organizations have come together and highlighted for your organization.
Okay. I see no other questions entered or hands raised, so I think we are all set, Bob.
Okay, well, perfect. So thank you all, and as I said earlier, you are all very important, valuable assets to your organization because of the knowledge that you have, because of the corporate culture that you've absorbed, and because of the job, the unique job that you do and that you can bring as a result of your training and experience to your organization. You're an extremely valuable asset to your organization, and Asset Management Awareness Month is a very good opportunity for you to go to your organization and demonstrate the value that you can add for them, making yourself more valuable for the organization and making your organization a more competitive, better place to do business. So thank you very much. If anybody thinks about other questions, feel free to shoot me an email or a telephone call, and I'd be happy to talk or communicate with you. Thanks so much, Jessica, and you're doing a great job on the whole Asset Awareness Month.
Thank you.